Hello and welcome to another episode of Thoughts Per Episode, House of the Dragon edition. Today, there was a wedding of sorts, but it wasn't red, it was green. Let's call it a green wedding. This episode obviously focused on the marriage between Rhaenyra Targaryen and Laenor Velaryon, which was pretty ill-fated from the start. They thought they could come to an arrangement. They were like, hey look, I've got a lover, you've got a lover, you're gay, and I think we can just like bonk to make children and then just go love our lovers instead. How's that sound? That sounds hunky-dory, and then it immediately all falls apart, because of course it does. All because Criston Cole had a bit of a normal one. He had a regular afternoon. I like the idea that the previous episode focused on Daemon trying to teach Rhaenyra about freedom, and this episode is the one that teaches her the opposite, that teaches her the consequences of her actions, of not thinking about those around her and the responsibilities she has and stuff like that. Let's begin at the beginning of the episode though. Daemon Targaryen murders his wife, because of course he does. We all saw it coming, we all knew it was going to happen. Viserys had backed the freedom-obsessed Daemon into a corner, told him to go home to his wife, literally had nothing else he could do besides get rid of his wife, so that's what he did. I don't exactly see what problem he had with her. She seemed lovely. I bet he would have liked her if he hadn't been made to marry her. I love the visit to House Velaryon on Driftmark, and just like how there was no one waiting there to greet them as like a slight, like, hey, remember, we don't fucking like you. But then as soon as Viserys is like, I want to marry our houses, Corlys is immediately like, oh, but he's still obsessed with like, well, okay, but they'll be called Velaryon, right? And by the way, that whole arrangement where her kids will have the last name Velaryon until they're king or queen and then they become Targaryen seems kind of dumb. I mean, I know the royal family in real life kind of has weird stuff going on with surnames, but that's the first time I've seen that pop up in Thrones. I don't remember that as part of the law, so maybe Laena and like I say, I don't remember what really comes after, and I'm trying not to remember, so I get to speculate, basically. But maybe Laenor and Rhaenyra don't even have children. Maybe it doesn't come to that. All I know is that from a Game of Thrones watcher's perspective, we know that House Velaryon isn't a thing anymore. House Hightower isn't a thing anymore. House Strong isn't a thing anymore. It's really interesting to see all these houses and wonder how and when they come crashing down. Alicent calling Criston Cole to her room to ask about Daemon and her, and just the whole bloody thing was an annoying use of dramatic irony, where it's like, we know Criston doesn't know about Daemon, we know Alicent doesn't know about Criston, and Alicent's words are picked so fucking specifically to be vague enough that makes him confess. It's like, ugh, why? I hate it when they do that shit in shows and stuff. We also see how Alicent's mercy leads to terrible things happening, which is kind of a theme in this series, right? Viserys' constant mercy towards Daemon, like even when he fucking shows up probably uninvited to this whole wedding shindig, you know, he's been exiled twice and Viserys is like, yeah sure, get him a seat, whatever. Like the whole act of granting mercy in this series is a big red flag. I don't know what that necessarily says about the thoughts of the people writing it, but you know, I mean, I guess it's the whole letting a snake into your nest and the snake's like, hey, I'm not a snake, and you're like, okay, sure, you can stay as long as you don't do any snake things. It's like, I definitely won't. And then there's a snake thing. And you're like, right, I said no snakes in my nest, and you chuck him out. And then he comes back, he's like, I'm really sorry, look, I won't eat any more of your eggs. And you're like, it would just be too much stress to chuck him out again. So sure, he said he's not going to eat any more of my eggs, and wait, where have I last put my eggs? Where have they gone? The welcome feast to Rhaenyra and Laena's wedding is such a good fucking scene. It's like a massive staged battle, but on the political side instead of a, you know, cutting each other upside, although that did kind of happen too. We've had a few instances of violence breaking out around Rhaenyra in this series, and violence occurring when it's not supposed to in this series, like back when she did the whole looking for a husband tour and those two houses clashed and the kid ended up killing that teenager who was making fun of him, and then also at the tourney when the knights got off their horses and started beating the shit out of each other and murdering each other. Again, it seems to be an undercurrent theme of like, Viserys is keeping the peace, but he's not really keeping the peace. He's kind of letting these things fester under his rule, Daemon being the biggest festering wart of all. Much like his body is rotting away from sitting on the Iron Throne and taking cuts from it by misrule is the metaphor there, his kingdom is also kind of rotting away at the same time. Alicent Hightower arrives fashionably late to the entire shindig, wearing green, which is basically the battle colours of House Old Town? What? House Hightower, that's the one. And the second she arrives, fucking Ramin Djawadi goes in hard with like it reminded me of Light of a Seven, the track that played when, spoilers for Game of Thrones, obviously Cersei blows up the Sept or whatever it's called, the church. I think it's specifically supposed to evoke those danger vibes. It made me sit up straight in my chair and go, oh God, what's happening? What's about to happen? You know? Laenor's sworn sword goes to talk to Rhaenyra's sworn sword, and they get into a bit of a scuffle. I think Laenor's boyfriend is trying to be like, hey, I got you. We just need to make sure we don't kill each other out of jealousy, right? But other than that, we're going to be friends, right? And then he kind of walks off. But Kristen Cole, like I said, is having a very normal moment in his head right now. He's feeling exceptionally normal. And what's interesting is the only real confrontation we don't see at this feast is the one that ends in the mortal death of poor Laenor's boyfriend. This episode started with both Rhaenyra and Laenor believing that they could do their duty to the realm and still, you know, do their duty to their loins, but they both ended up mourning their, for whatever reason, mourning their lovers. Kristen Cole, of course, does not get to commit seppuku. He gets stopped by Alicent, or at least we're led to believe he does. We don't really see what happens after that. For all we know, we're going to see him hanging at the start of the next episode and Alicent fucking did it or something. I don't know. I think for whatever reason, Alicent wants him around still. I felt sympathetic towards Kristen Cole until the moment he suggested to Rhaenyra at the start of this episode that they run away together and get married. I was like, buddy, ooh, buddy, you hate to see it, you know? One shag and suddenly he wants her to abandon her entire kingdom and birthright so she can run off to Essos with him. You hate to see it. And, you know, Rhaenyra's like, well, no, I do have responsibilities, but look, we can still do this. I've made allowances with Laena. And instead of recognizing that Rhaenyra has, you know, bent over backwards to make sure that he still has a place in her life and that they can have some sort of relationship under the whole being a princess and having to run a kingdom thing. Instead, he goes for the whole, you want me to be your whore? Which, you know, goodbye, the lovable character of Kristen Cole, you are now dead to me. That's some toxic masculinity right there, if I've ever seen it. One little sleight of hand touch which I found interesting is that given the fact that Alicent never reveals to Kristen Cole that she did not get information about him and Rhaenyra, that she did not actually know that he's the one who gave it away to her, Kristen Cole probably believed that Laena gave it away to Alicent, and that might have fueled his anger towards the two, Laena and his boyfriend, whose name I need to remember the name of. So when he spent a few days stewing in his own, like, oh my god, I'm fucking nothing, I can't be a white knight anymore, the queen knows what I've done, she probably doesn't see me as a white knight anymore, I have nothing, I am nobody. After he wallows in that self-loathing for a while, he gets to turn that rage against a guy who's like, we just need to not kill each other over jealousy. Right? And it's not a simple dagger out into the heart or across the throat kind of deal. He fucking pummels that guy's head in. He fucking punches him until his brains are mushing out of his skull. Partly because this is a Game of Thrones series and we need to make things as graphic and intense as possible, but also to show like the hot rage inside of him and like how he's not seeing anything apart from red, and just how brutal the beast inside of this like gentle knight is. But damn, my guy, Kristen Cole really I would say went through it, but put other people through it. I don't really like that guy anymore. He's, you know, we don't like people who bash other people's brains out over the sake of a girl you like. And then of course we have a scene at the very end of the episode where the two of them are getting married. So there's a thing, right, at the very last scene where it zooms out and you see the blood on the floor where Laena's boyfriend died. And you can take that of one of two ways. Either they brought the wedding up, as can be evidenced by the lack of guests as well. They were like, after today's events, we just need to get you two married as quickly as possible, because Laena's still sobbing and everything, and the more I talk about this, the more I believe this might be the case. Or it was just metaphorical because they would have cleaned the blood off the floor after a week. But no, I think it was probably the former now that I've said it out loud. And what a fucking Thrones wedding of just one of them sobbing. One of them sobbing through his vows, the other as monotone as she can be through her vows, and then the fucking king collapsing and likely dying at the very end of it. I will miss Viserys. He was quite a fascinatingly incompetent and dull king, which is a sentence. And I believe this is the last episode as well with Millie Alcock, and Oh, who plays Alison Hightower? Her. They're gonna age up now. I'm very interested to see where the series goes from here. Obviously, I know the broader strokes of what happens. Although, even as far as the alliances that are made goes, I don't quite remember. But I'm interested specifically to see how the relationship between Rhaenyra and Alicent goes from here. And what's next for Alicent, because after the king dies, I don't really know what function she serves as a character. Traditionally, the wives of dead kings are pretty much brushed aside in court, right? They're just kind of meant to be grieving their husband for the rest of their lives until they die quietly out of sight. So maybe they'll explore that and what that's like for Alicent, who never really loved her husband. We'll see. I'm excited to see what happens next. I never watched the What's Next previews until I've recorded these, so I'm going to go and do that next. But thank you very much for watching, or listening, I guess I should say. If you like this video, remember not to beat the shit out of your lover's husband's lover, and I'll see you next week.